The Lost Cause by Kieran Fischer. During the American Civil War, the Confederate people were fighting for a new nation, one that was the true intent of the founding fathers. The Southerners were not fighting to rule the Union, but rather to be independent from it. Nowadays, many Southerners call the Confederacy's mission the Lost Cause. The Confederate States of America was very similar to the Union in terms of the government. Many of the details were the same between the two constitutions. For example, in both constitutions, a person must return to a state if a crime is committed there. And both governments had a bicameral Congress, and the head of the executive branches were both elected officials. However, the Confederate States promoted interstate slave trade through the government as well as other forms of trade. In fact, the Confederacy actually banned African slave trade in order to promote intra-Confederate trade. When the South declared independence, many Southern congressmen for the Union shifted their power to the new Confederacy. In fact, when the Confederate people had the first public elections, a third of the new Congress had members that were formerly Union congressmen. Others had been involved in state government when the South was still part of the Union. In the Confederacy, there were 28 senators and 122 representatives. All of them were white men, just like in the Union. Confederate President Jefferson Davis was first elected to office by 43 delegates at the Montgomery Convention. 9 months later, he was elected once again to office by a public election for a 6-year term. There were no political parties at the beginning of the new Confederacy. This was both an advantage and a problem. The congressmen would vote for what they truly believe, but there was no sense of unity as a result. This would eventually separate the governments. After the start of the Civil War, there was a crisis. The new government could not raise enough money for the war. To solve this problem, they appointed Chris Memminger to be in charge of the Treasury. He stayed in office for 3 years despite ruining the economy of the South and leaving the Confederacy bankrupt soon after the writing of the Constitution. Inflation increased dramatically. In fact, the Confederate dollar went from 95 cents to gold to about 1 cent of gold. But the Confederate government was too busy to attend to that matter, as the Civil War was raging on. What they could do was take out loans, and much Confederate counterfeit money was added into circulation. From the birth of the Confederacy to 1862, there was very little arguing between the states, and there was almost no conflict over constitutionality. Then later, there were fights over which body was supreme, the federal or state government. They resolved this issue and decided the federal government was in charge. Towards the end of the Confederate States, when the South was almost defeated, many states acted in their own interest and acted independently. Thus, the Confederacy broke down.